Hello everybody and welcome to the DisruptAbility Podcast. Today we're talking to Jane Hatton from Evenbreak. This is an award-winning enterprise run for and by disabled people to help inclusive employers recruit and retain incredible disabled talent. She gives us amazing insights and information in this interview. I hope you enjoy it and thank you for listening. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the DisruptAbility Podcast. I am absolutely delighted this morning to be speaking to Jane Hatton, who is the director, CEO, Jane, am I right?
Director, yes.
Yeah, CEO of Evenbreak, which is a recruitment company and a social enterprise in Britain, and she's going to tell us all about it today. So good morning, Jane, how are you?
Morning, delighted to be here.
And so am I to have you here. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space?
Yeah, so the short version is that my background is in diversity, kind of pan-diversity, looking at race and gender and disability and all of the other characteristics. And when I used to talk to employers, particularly about disability, there would be one of two reactions. One would be, why would I employ a disabled person? They might not say it in those words, but they may as well have done. The other one, a bit more positively, would have been, we recognise that this is a pool of talent we should be tapping into, but we have no idea how to go about this. And I spoke to disabled people and said, why aren't you applying to the second group of people? And they said, because we don't know who they are. Every employer will say we're an equal opportunities employer. But actually we know that most aren't, and our experience is that as soon as our disability becomes apparent, then the recruitment process comes to an abrupt end. And I can remember thinking, well, that's really bad, somebody ought to do something about that. And then a few years later I became one of the 83% of disabled people who become disabled as adults, and actually nobody was doing anything about it. And I thought maybe I should. And I'd love to take credit for coming up with the idea, but actually it was one of the shareholders in my previous diversity training company. And he was sort of saying, how do I attract disabled candidates? And by trainer mode, I gave him a list of 50 different things he could do. And he said, I just don't have the time for all of this. I wish there was a company out there who could do this for us. Mm. So that was kind of a bit of a light bulb moment. And we came up with the idea of a job board, like any other job board, except that in some respects not like any other job board, that it would just be for disabled candidates, just for those employers who were enlightened enough to know that actually employing disabled people is good for their business. And so Evenbreak was born. And so the theory behind Evenbreak, which is borne out in practice, is that for those candidates who don't know which employers to trust, because most employers, as we know, will drop them at the first sign of any kind of impairment, if they use Evenbreak, they'll know that those employers have paid to advertise their jobs on a job board that's only for disabled people. So that gives them, A, the confidence to apply, because obviously their disability isn't going to be a barrier. And also, interestingly, it makes them feel more confident to be open about what their access needs might be, because they know it's not going to be a barrier for those employers. And from the employer's perspective, it means they're now going to attract candidates that they wouldn't have attracted from any other source. So they get additional talent that they wouldn't have otherwise had, and candidates get the knowledge that these employers are going to take them seriously. So it kind of works, from both ends of the recruitment thing, if you look at it. And also what we do is we only employ disabled people ourselves, so that we have massive internal intelligence around, I'm an expert in my own impairment and how it affects me, but not in how my impairment affects anybody else, or how any different impairments affect people. So there are currently 10, but we'll soon be 12 or 13, and we all have different impairments and we learn from each other. So I like to think we've got that internal intelligence and the confidence of disabled candidates that we understand the barriers that they face. Sorry, that was supposed to be the short answer, but it turned out to be the long answer.
No, that's brilliant. And Jane, you've touched on so many things. Like, first of all, the fear from employers. The heart is good, the intention is good, but then it becomes too complex and they don't know where to go. So now they can go to Evenbreak. But the other thing I like there is your internal intelligence, because disability is so broad. And just because I have a disability, it doesn't mean I have all the answers for every other disability or health condition.
Well, nobody does, do they? Nobody has all the answers. It is so complex.
So I like that term, internal intelligence. And I also like the fact that all of us who are working in the accessibility, disability, business inclusion field, we're all very willing to share.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I go to, let's say, a client meeting with one of my colleagues, and, he or she will be able to give their perspective. And the internal intelligence discussion is one that we very much have with employers, and say that, for employers, it should be of interest to them from two aspects, well, at least two aspects. One is about attracting the right talent, but also it's about meeting the needs of customers. So we know that, roughly 20% of the population considers themselves to be disabled or have a long-term health condition. So if your business isn't meeting their needs, that's a fifth of your potential market that you're losing. And of course, all of us disabled people have friends and family as well. So the spend that you might be missing out on is enormous. It's about £250 billion a year in the UK, for example. So what we're saying to employers is, we have that internal intelligence, which we so enormously benefit from, but they could have it too. So the more disabled people they employ, the greater their internal intelligence, so that they can then attract more talented disabled candidates, and they can serve the needs of disabled customers so much more. So I think I'd like to think we're a bit of a positive role model in that respect, and that we're modelling. This is actually what you could gain from too.
I like that, and modelling so that other people can, other countries, other geographies can follow this idea.
Sure.
So how does it work? An employer comes to you, say, I'm an employer and I want to diversify. Do I create?
I wish it happened that way. Very rarely does it happen that way. Usually it's us going to employers. And it's interesting. I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but still in the UK, it's very much, talk about diversity. And a few years ago, I think business people would have said, diversity, that's got nothing to do with us, we're a business. Now they're saying, oh yes, diversity, we're doing a lot on diversity. And they'll tell me enthusiastically what they're doing about attracting BAME candidates, and what they're doing about getting women into boardroom positions. And all of that is enormously important. And I'll say, that's fantastic. It's really good to hear that you're doing all of that stuff. And what are you doing on disability? And the whole tone of voice changes, and it's, oh, yeah, well, we really ought to be doing something. And it's such a shame for those poor people. And I have to interrupt and say, no, we're not talking about pity. We're talking about talent. And in the same way that you wouldn't want to exclude female talent or talent from people from ethnic minority backgrounds, disabled people have an enormous amount of talent that your organisation needs and you may be missing out on. And it's trying to get that message across that employing disabled people isn't a CSR activity. It isn't an act of charity. It isn't something that makes the organisation look good and pink and fluffy and all warm and fuzzy. It's a solid business decision. This is about talent that your organisation needs that you may not be accessing at the moment. And it's trying to really turn the whole conversation with employers to, what are you really struggling with at the moment? And it's skill shortages is the big thing that most employers are really struggling with. And we're sort of saying, I'm not sure the skill shortages are as big as you think they are. It's just that you may not be looking in the right places. And we have candidates who have the skills you're looking for. All you need to do is remove the barriers that are currently preventing them from applying to your organisation. And it turns the whole discussion on its head. So this isn't about, oh, poor disabled people, we ought to give them a chance. This is about, oh my God, look at all that talent that we need in our organisation. And I think once employers get that message, then it stops being a kind of, we really ought to do this, but it's too difficult or too expensive or too whatever. It becomes, this is a priority, we need to look at how we can do this. And then the whole conversation changes.
I think what you've described there is very similar to the situation in Ireland as well, because it's when you say diversity and inclusion, people are talking about gender, LGBT, all race. And disability, there has to be a massive cultural shift.
It's
and I want to know, how do we bring that cultural shift around? Because we are coming from a history of and a tradition of charity and medical model and sympathy and tragedy. So the people who are in business, it's not their fault, it's their unconscious bias. It's like, oh, disability, oh, that's something outside the room. Whereas when I go and I say, no, it's in the room, it's here, it's real.
Yeah.
How do we make that shift, Jane, to bring it mainstream?
Well, so I think there are a number of ways. And I think one of the things that a lot of employers won't be aware of is that they will already be employing disabled people. They just won't know it. So I think there's a culture of fear amongst disabled people about being open, because we know through our own experience that once an employer knows that there is an impairment, it could be mental health, it could be anything, that the promotion chances get reduced, that people are looking at us differently. So a lot of people will be not open about their impairments. And as we know, most disabilities aren't visibly obvious anyway. So part of it is saying, you're already doing this, but you could do it so much better. But also, I think the real push for us, certainly at Evenbreak, is we're trying to really get businesses to look at this as though, from a selfish point of view, almost, what can the business gain from this? So it's not about, feel sorry for people, give them an opportunity. It's, what would you gain as a business by employing disabled people? Well, there are so many things. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called 12 Brilliant Reasons to Employ Disabled People. And there are far more than a dozen, but it was just a catchy title. But it's things like productivity. It's things like different thinking styles, creativity. People bring, from the social model of disability, by the definition of the social model of disability, every disabled person faces barriers every day that other people don't. And we develop, because we have to survive, creative problem-solving skills. And what employer doesn't need employees who don't run away at the first sign of a problem, but actually think, oh, maybe there are other ways around this problem. Maybe we could apply a different way of thinking to it. And all the other benefits to do with, as we said before, being attractive to disabled clients and customers. So for me, it's really saying to a business, you need to be selfish about this. This is about what you can gain from having a more diverse workforce, and diversity and inclusion has to include disabled people. Otherwise, it's not diversity and inclusion. So it's very much about promoting the business case, which is unfortunate. I'm looking forward to the point, in evolution, when we just look at talent, whatever shape or form or colour it comes in. But we're not there yet. And I think there still is a kind of, from an employer's perspective, a perception that employing disabled people is going to be expensive, that there are going to be adjustments they need to put in place, which there may well be. But often they're already offering those adjustments. So often it's flexible working. And most companies now offer flexible working, and it might initially have been around mums of young children working flexibly. But actually, we recognise that lots of employees want flexible working, and it's nothing to do with childcare. It might be to do with elder care, or it might be someone's doing an open university degree, or whatever it might be. But actually what a lot of disabled people need is flexible working. So those things are already there. So I think it's about promoting the benefits and also reducing the myths and the fears. Disabled people may need some adjustments. Most of us don't. But the adjustments that we need will usually be something simple like flexible working, which you're already offering. Or for someone with visual impairment, make sure that the walkways are clear. You're not piling up rubbish in the corridors for us to trip up over. Or for, I don't know, someone with hearing loss, make sure that you're not have your back to the window so that they can see to lip read. They're not expensive things. They're just different ways of working, which are pretty easy to implement. And I don't know what happens in Ireland. In the UK, we have Access to Work, which is a government-led initiative, I suppose you could call it, which actually will pay for most of the adjustments that disabled people need anyway, so that the employer doesn't miss out. So I think it's a combination of your business is really going to benefit from employing disabled people, and all of the myths that you think about how difficult it's going to be, it really isn't. You just need to say to the disabled person, what do you need to thrive here? And it's usually very simple.
We're similar in Ireland in terms of we don't have access to work, but we would have the government would provide grants and supports for like work equipment adaptation grants, or anything that someone would need, even wage subsidy schemes, if there is a 20% productivity reduction, that all of that will be supported. Do you in Evenbreak help the employers look at what reasonable accommodations will be needed for an individual who's getting a job in the company, or how does that work?
So we don't get involved with individual candidates. But what we very much do, and are doing increasingly, is helping employers understand how to become more inclusive and accessible generally. Because I think, the message there is, if you have an individual candidate who has specific needs, what process do you put in place to address that? And usually it's very simple. It's about, as I say, saying to the candidate at every stage in the process, the recruitment process, what do you need for us to do for you to be able to shine in this process? And that's not just for disabled candidates, that could be for any candidate, so that people feel safe to say, I need a bit longer for questions, or I need a British Sign Language interpreter, or whatever it might be. So what we do is we help organisations with their recruitment process, how they can remove some of the barriers that might currently exist. So it might be where they advertise, how they advertise, what assessment processes they use. We feel personally that CVs and interviews aren't always the best way to find out somebody's suitability for a job, any candidate, let alone a disabled candidate, and that there are more inclusive ways of doing things. So we actually work with organisations to help them become much more inclusive and accessible overall. And sometimes it's about being anticipatory. So rather than waiting for someone to come along and say, oh, I need X, it's about having systems in place so that that's kind of already available, or it's easy to get hold of, so that individual managers don't have to think, I don't have a clue where to start with this, that they can go somewhere internally or externally and say, right, where do I find a British Sign Language interpreter? Or someone said they're autistic, what does that mean I need to do? Or, those kinds of, just to make people feel more confident and competent around inclusion and accessibility generally.
And do you do this by training in the organisations?
So there's a range of things. At the moment, we have a best practice portal, which is a range of online resources. And they're very practical resources. So it might be a one-pager or a 2-minute video. And it's led by disabled people ourselves, and also employers who are doing really well in this space. So, for example, on the how do you interview somebody with autism, we have an autistic candidate talking about the barriers that he faces in interviews. And then he suggests alternative ways of assessing someone's suitability. But if you do have to interview, because that's part of your process, and you can't offer alternatives, what you'd need to bear in mind if you're interviewing someone with autism, as an example. Another example might be, we recreated a blind person's induction into an organisation, because the manager was saying, we wanted to take on this person because they had absolutely the best qualities for the job. But he said, I've never inducted a blind person before. And normally we'd say, the lifts are over there and you hang your coat over there. But of course you can't do that with a blind new recruit. So we recreated the process, which was, in this case, the person used a cane rather than a guide dog. And they recorded everything. So I go through the entrance and then I follow the wall to the right and the lifts are there. They introduced Aidan to the cafe staff so that they knew to read out the menu to him when he came for lunch. And just made it all much easier. And of course, it's very simple. But for some managers, it might be, I wouldn't know where to start. So it's all sorts of really practical ways of making all of this seemingly mystical process much easier for people. So that's what we offer at the moment. And for subscribing organisations, everybody within the organisation has access to that portal. But increasingly, we're being asked for training and consultancy as well. So we're going to be offering training around things like, attraction strategies, engagement, advertising, how you assess candidates, how you onboard candidates, those kinds of things. and consultancy on those areas as well. And we'll be working in partnership with other providers who will offer things around that surround it, so that there's a complete service there. So, for example, one of the organisations we work with called Diversity and Ability, what they offer is a bit more of that individual support. So if an employer takes on a new employee and the line manager isn't quite too sure how to make this work very well, this organisation will go in and do some co-coaching with the line manager and the candidate to work out the best ways of working together and how it's going to work for both both people within the organisation. So what we're looking at providing, either ourselves or with partners, is a kind of all-round service that will make employers feel much more comfortable and willing to do, the right thing in terms of accessing all this talent that they're not accessing currently.
It sounds brilliant. It sounds to me like you're the one-stop shop. It's a very comprehensive strategy on everything to do with disability, employment, business inclusion, everything. One place, go to Evenbreak.
Well, I think that's really what we need to offer, because I do think that the biggest barrier is employers not knowing what to do and being frightened of doing the wrong thing. And what we're saying is, if you can remove that fear and that ignorance, those are the biggest barriers. I mean, yes, there are structural barriers like, inaccessible websites or inaccessible buildings. But I think if we can get the mindset right, those are fairly easy, usually, to overcome, so long as the employer sees that it's worth doing that, because they're going to access all this talent they didn't have before. So although there are structural barriers for disabled people that there aren't for maybe some of the other protected characteristics, I think those are much easier to solve once the mindset of, actually, we need to be inclusive and accessible because it's good for us as a business, then everything else almost falls into place. And of course, the more disabled people that, as we said earlier, that an employer employs, the greater all of that knowledge is about what you can do to make the place more accessible and inclusive. And it's usually much easier than people think it's going to be.
That's so true, because you can look at the bigger things, as you said, like the inaccessible buildings, or for me, inaccessible transport, public transport, that, that job is perfect for me, but to get there, I'm going to need 3 buses, that's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable. But some of the things that people can change, and attitude being one of them, and awareness being one of them, it can have such a massive impact.
Well, absolutely. And I think what happens is that if we look at things through a disability lens, it actually improves things for everybody. So, you talk about inaccessible transport, and of course that's the case for lots and lots of different people. But, organisations are now beginning to realise that, and we do it at Evenbreak, all of us work flexibly from home. Most jobs can be done either entirely or partly remotely. So you haven't got to worry about an inaccessible building or inaccessible transport, because if somebody can work from home, then none of that becomes relevant. None of those are barriers to them working. It doesn't mean those things shouldn't be addressed. Of course, they should still be addressed. But it does mean that there isn't a barrier. I mean, I feel really lucky because we don't have offices at Evenbreak. Obviously, if we're going to speak to a big corporate, we're going to go to them. We wouldn't expect them to come to us. And what that means is that we can all work flexibly from home, which means that we are working in an environment that's already set up for us. But also, crucially, it means that we have access to talent from anywhere. So if we did have an office, say in central London, we would only be able to employ people who can access and travel easily to that office in central London. Whereas as it stands, we have, somebody in Glasgow, people in the Midlands, people in London, people in Devon. So that actually we're not restricted when we're looking for talent to people who can travel to a certain location. We can be much more broad, and we can look for talent anywhere. And actually, so can any other organisation. And I think obviously there are jobs that you can't do remotely. You can't be a nurse remotely. You can't be a receptionist remotely. But most jobs you are able to do some of, if not all of the job remotely. And why wouldn't we do that? That saves the organisation, having to pay for offices and all of that kind of, and it also saves the environment in terms of, everybody getting in a car or on a train at the same time every day in rush hour. So I think home working and looking at working more flexibly is one of the solutions, not just for disabled people, but for all sorts of other people as well. So people who've got caring responsibilities, or in our case, with some of the people, with all of us, I think pretty much, that have fluctuating conditions, it might be that you can't do a full day's work in a full day, but you might split that up over the week and do it in different times of the. I don't care if people who work for me work at 2:00 on a Sunday morning. It's entirely their choice. And restricting people to 9 to 5 in an office, to me, is not a great way of getting the best out of anybody, let alone disabled people. So I think the more flexible and creative we get about the way that we work actually benefits all of us, not just disabled people, but it certainly opens the doors to far more disabled people than we're currently opened.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of remote working, of flexible working, but I still think there's a huge amount of education we need around that. So say, for example, I've been a teacher for the last 26 years. I'm used to going into a school, into a staff room, meeting people, I suppose having huge technological support when some of my assistive technology didn't work. And now I'm working for myself and I work from home and I love it. I love the flexibility of it. But I must say, Jane, the boundaries, I'm still learning my boundaries in terms of when to finish. Yes. And the technical support isn't there anymore. So every technical problem is my problem. But I think there is a space for the preparation for not just the organization to bring remote working on, but for the individual. Do you do training in that for people? If you're helping get jobs and then it's a remote position, how much support does the individual get so that they know how to work from home?
Again, it's something that we would advise employers on in terms of, and again, we can do it from a place of authenticity because it's what we do as as our day job. Is very much about, and also I think one of the other issues about remote working, although it can be very flexible, it can also be very isolating.
Yes.
Part of the reason that lots of people go to work is for the social interaction with people, to spend time with people, to feel as though you're part of a group. So what we do at Evenbreak, for example, is we have, like we're doing now, we have Zoom meetings, so that we have, weekly meetings for all of the kind of management team, so that we can see each other's faces and we can body language and all those important things. And then we'll have other meetings with each other in between those. And we might relate to clients as well over Zoom. So I think it's about making the best use of technology. And there's so much technology now, there's no reason why people shouldn't tap into it. So it's about using the best use of technology, but also, as you say, in our staff handbook, we have guidelines about taking regular breaks, making sure that you eat regularly, drinking, keeping hydrated, getting up and walking around, if you can walk around, but those kinds of things are really important as well, because otherwise it can be, I don't know if you're the same as me, but sometimes I'll get into the flow of doing something and it's 4:00 and I realize I haven't had a drink since I got up this morning. That's not good. So it's about that kind of making sure that the self-care bit still happens, because at work it's somebody says, do you want a coffee? And everybody stops for coffee, and it doesn't happen when you work on your own. So I think, yes, there are certainly good practice that we can share with employers around how do you manage people who are working remotely, not just in terms of performance managing, but more importantly in terms of their well-being and their making sure that they manage themselves, properly. Because I think one of the big fears is that people who work from home aren't very productive because they get bogged down with daytime television and if only, and I'll put the washing on or I'll pop out and do the shopping. But actually all the evidence suggests that people who work from home are far more productive on average, because we don't have the interruptions at the office. We don't have, the phone ringing all the time, or somebody asking about, did you watch EastEnders last night, or whatever it might be. You don't get the interruptions, so you tend to be far more productive. And as you say, the danger is actually that you don't stop working rather than that you don't work enough. So I think there is a big education piece on how to manage people who are working from home, and recognizing that it isn't necessarily about performance management. It's about making sure that all of those well-being things still happen even when you have remote workers.
I think that's it. I think we often focus on the performance management, but it's about the person themselves. And when you say there's an education element missing, I suppose because I did work in further education for so long, I think because remote working will grow, it is going to grow. It's going to be part of the future of work in all societies, that there's a module that needs to be designed for whether it's high school, secondary school, further education, third level, that there might be an opportunity for you at some stage to do remote working. This is how you do it. And I've learned now the whole self-care thing to actually timetable in my walk. Like, have I done my exercise today? Yeah. The nutrition is huge. Yes, the staying hydrated. And I'm going to just even say today is Friday, and at 1:30 I'm going to the Cork Film Festival on purpose to say it is Friday. And you have to do something fun at the end of the week, and it's only on for 10 days. See a film in the Cork Film Festival, Yeah. But it's making sure that you do leave the desk and do other stuff. Yeah.
But I do also think that it's about getting out of the 9-to-5 mindset, because I will quite often, I probably do my best work at the weekend because nothing else is happening at the weekend, but I might take a day off during the week and do something for me. I think the sort of 9-to-5 Monday to Friday is an arbitrary decision about when people do their best work. But I mean, people, some people are night people, some people are morning people. And I think it's the opportunity for remote working is that you can work when it works for you. So it might be around your family commitments, but it also might be about, I do my best thinking at 10 o'clock at night, but I'm not great at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that's when I'm going to do my creative stuff. I'm not going to do my creative stuff at 9 in the morning because it's going to be rubbish. I'm going to do it at 10 at night when I come alive. And other people, it might be, actually, I'm really on the ball at 7 o'clock in the morning, but by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I've had it. And really the beauty of remote working is that you can work around your own, there's a name for it, something clock, when you work at your best and when it fits in with your life outside of work as well, whether that's fluctuating health conditions or whether it's family commitments or hobbies or, whatever it is. But it's important, as you say, to schedule those things in. Otherwise, you end up, something falls off, and sometimes it could be family, sometimes it could be your own self-care. And it's important, I think, that we, and certainly at Evenbreak, we're very careful to make sure that, if people have children, that they're able to meet their children's needs, as a parent. I can remember in my previous job, someone coming in who'd worked for a traditional employer previously and saying, oh, my son's in an assembly tomorrow. And I said, well, you have to be there. And she said, but I'm here at 9 o'clock. No. You can't have your son on that stage looking out and his mum's not in the audience and everybody, you have to be there. Of course, what happens when you're flexible with people is that they're flexible back. So she went to her son's assembly, but then if we had a deadline, she might stay behind to work on that. And I think it's a partnership, isn't it, always between the employer and the employee. And I think if you're flexible with employees and you recognise that they have a life outside of work that's just as important, they will then give you back in spades, loyalty and commitment. And for me, I can't see any other sensible way of working. But I hear so many people say, oh, my boss doesn't understand, and my boss, and I just think, why would you do that?
I want to work for you. No, but it's so true, because what you're bringing in there is the whole intersectionality,
Yes.
Like you're not just a person with a disability, you're,
person.
You might be a mum or a dad, or you have hobbies, or you have other responsibilities, or you're doing there's so many other parts to your life. It's not like there could be many reasons for remote working, not just one.
Absolutely.
There can be push and pull factors in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you talk about intersectionality, because it's something that we're really very, very conscious of at Evenbreak. And something really lovely happened recently. So there are only 10 of us at the moment, but we're a very diverse group, not just in terms of impairments. So we cover mental health and hearing loss and sight loss and mobility and chronic pain and ME and, all of that kind of stuff. But also we're an incredibly diverse team in every other respect as well. So I think our ages range from 19 to 70 or something. And we have a really good split of gender. We have a really good, I think 30% BAME, representation, good representation of different sexual orientations, almost by accident. I mean, I've been very keen on diversity all along, but actually, if you're just looking for talent, you are by definition going to find a diverse, because talent is diverse. You find it in diverse people. And so, although our commonality is that we all have an impairment, we have so much other diversity going on as well. And that must almost by osmosis translate into the work that we do. And we were working with a company recently, and they did some research on the top specialist job boards for BAME candidates and for gender. And we came in the top 10 for both, which is amazing when you think our target audience is disability. But of course, disability doesn't discriminate, does it? You know, you can be disabled and black, or disabled and gay, or disabled and female, or disabled and black and gay and female. You know, and I think that one of the things we try and say to employers is, you can't silo. You can't say this year, and they do, don't they? This year we're doing race. Next year we're doing gender. So if you're a black woman, which of those two initiatives do you fit into? And when it comes disability's turn, are you going to then forget about all the stuff you've done on race? And you can't do that. People don't fit into boxes. And for me, it's about, you've come across, I'm sure, Caroline Casey and Valuable 500. And she says you can't be diverse-ish. You're either inclusive or you're not inclusive. You can't say, we're inclusive to that group over there, but not that group over there. That's not inclusion. And I think when we talk to employers, it's very much about, if you get things right for disability, you get things right automatically for the other groups as well. Because the biggest barrier, as we said earlier on, for disabled people is perception. And that's the same for every other group. You know, there's a perception that white is better than black, that male is better than female, that straight is better than gay. And until we start challenging those ridiculous stereotypes, we're never going to get any further forward. And that's the same with disability. There's a perception that non-disabled is better than disabled. But actually, with disability, we do also have those structural things that we talked about earlier on. So if we can get disability right in terms of perception and in terms of pulling down those structural barriers, automatically other groups get involved as well. So it's not just about disabled people, it's about everyone. And inclusion and accessibility makes things better for disabled people, but it makes things better for other people too. So I think that's the message that we really need to say. This isn't just about disability. Inclusion benefits everybody. Even if they have no protected characteristics, it benefits everybody.
That you've just said it so well. That's exactly it. You know, it just benefits everyone, and discrimination does not, or sorry, disability does not discriminate, you know, like anyone can have.
Yes, it could be
still, and there's so many other things going on in your life. Where are you going with Evenbreak? You're in Britain at the moment. Have you plans to expand, or?
Massive plans. So we're on a bit of a growth spurt at the moment, which is incredibly exciting. So earlier this year, we had a new job board built for us. Back in 2011, when we started, it sounds bizarre now, but you couldn't use your mobile phone to get on the internet. I know that sounds almost impossible now, but of course now that is the case. And our website previously, although the most accessible job board, wasn't good on a mobile phone, so we had to change it. So we have a new website job board that came on stream in April, and that has the facility to advertise jobs anywhere in the world. And what we've discovered over the years is that, we haven't really done it deliberately, but we have really good search engine optimization, and we get a lot of traffic from disabled candidates in other countries. And much as I complain about the UK and how behind we are in a lot of respects to do with inclusion, we are bizarrely quite a way ahead of lots of other countries. So we may get candidates who contact us, say, from India or from parts of Africa or even America, who say, you know, can you get us a job in the UK because we can't get a job in our own country? And I think that's wrong. I don't think people should have to relocate. I think disabled people should be able to choose to work where they live and where their family is. So we're now looking at expanding globally. So we can already advertise jobs in other countries in the world, and we're beginning to start doing that. And then what we'll be able to do, because of our remote way of working, it's going to be no harder for us to employ someone in America or India or Africa than it is to employ Kiana in Glasgow. it's the same technology, it's the same way of working. So we're increasingly looking at going global. And that's beginning with a lot of our current employers have international jobs as well as their UK jobs. So we're going to be advertising their jobs abroad as well as their jobs in the UK and testing the markets and seeing how it goes. And then we can find out the countries where this is getting, good traction. And then we can employ people in those countries to do the candidate attraction piece there as well. So that's really exciting. It's not as difficult as it sounds, because actually it's about doing what we do now in the UK, but just doing it further afield. So it would still be about helping employers become more inclusive and accessible, sharing good practice, training, consultancy. Some of that can be done remotely. Some of it can be done with us using partners in their countries. So that's, that's really exciting, I think. Mm-hmm. And I do think that this is a global issue. I mean, we know when we look at disability that, across the world, we're talking about, a lot of people who are disabled and who have the same rights to work and be independent and have choice as non-disabled people. And that's not happening in a lot of countries. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. And it's very exciting to feel that we might be able to contribute towards that. So that's one of our goals. The other thing is about working more in partnership with people and offering more in terms of services to employers around training and consultancy, but also about some of those services that we won't get involved in, but that partners already do very well, and actually making sure that happens.
Okay, from everything you've said there, wow, it's scaling up. It's brilliant. I have two questions. One, if I apply for a job on job board, am I just competing against other people with disabilities, or is the job also open to everyone, but it just happens to be on the job board as well? Yeah. That's my first question. Number two, Brexit. You might make a comment on.
Yeah, number one, because that's the easier one.
Yeah.
So what we do is we advertise all of the roles of our employers on Evenbreak. So the employer will have all of the candidates they would have anyway from all their other attraction strategy, plus disabled candidates from Evenbreak. But they will now be becoming educated that actually those candidates will bring additional things with them. So they should be, really taken seriously. So yeah, we don't separate. We don't kind of say, well, here are the mainstream candidates and here are the Evenbreak candidates, because the most important thing about Evenbreak candidates and disabled candidates is the skills that they bring with them. Their disability is almost irrelevant until it comes to the point of any adjustments they might need, or the additional things that they bring with them. So yes, it's about extending your candidate pool, so you also include talented disabled candidates. Mm-hmm. And feedback we've had from employers is that, maybe not surprisingly, disabled people tend to only apply for jobs they can almost do standing on their head with their eyes closed, because of the history of rejection. I think there's some statistics around somewhere, I can't remember the numbers, that men will apply for a job they can do 60% of, whereas women tend to only apply for a job they think they can do 100% of. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like that with disabled candidates, that they know they're going to be disadvantaged because of discrimination. So they tend to only go for jobs that they know that they can do. So those candidates that are additional for those employers will be candidates who are really suited to the job that they're applying for, whereas a lot of their mainstream candidates might not be. So it's the quality as well as the quantity of candidates. In terms of Brexit, I'm very much a Remainer. I feel as though I am a European and I want to stay as a European. I don't let politics affect what we do in Evenbreak. Evenbreak has to be apolitical, of course, because we work with people from all different political persuasions. The only good thing, from my perspective, about Brexit is that it is making employers look more closely at where they're going to get their talent from. And there are a lot of sectors that have relied on European workers. So that could be agriculture, hospitality. I mean, I live in the centre of London. Hospitality, a lot of European people work in hospitality. If we're going to lose those workers, or a proportion of those workers, where else are we going to look? Lots of disabled people would be great at working in hospitality. So I think for me, the only good news about Brexit is that it's going to make employers be much more open about where they get talent from, and that's, I think, an opportunity that we need to grab hold of. My hope is still that Brexit doesn't happen. I don't know whether that's going to be the case or not. Even if it doesn't happen, I still think employers need to be looking at where they get their talent from and looking in different pools and different places. So I think Brexit has brought that to the fore for employers about where do we find talent now, and are there different pools of talent that we can be looking in. But I can't think of much else that's good about Brexit, if I'm honest, from a personal perspective.
And from my own personal perspective, and I think from Ireland on the whole, we're heartbroken about Brexit. We don't want it to happen either. I hope you remain, and especially from, I suppose, a disability point of view, you've always been leaders. Britain has been leaders, and we need you at the table, at the European table, so that we're leaders in the world in terms of disability, so we want you to remain too.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's just so uncertain at the moment, but I mean, I think certainly from an Evenbreak point of view, we'll be able to support Ireland and bring all of our good practice across to you, and hopefully share it with you and learn from you too. You have some great employers in Ireland that we'd love to get involved with.
We do, and you mentioned Dr. Caroline Casey earlier, and she is Irish. She's from Dublin, and we're so proud of her and all the work that she's doing with the Valuable 500.
Absolutely. So I hope that whatever happens with Brexit, that there will be lots of international cross-fertilisation and learning and sharing of good practice, regardless of where the artificial boundaries are. And certainly at Evenbreak, whatever happens with Brexit, we're very much, going to be working internationally and openly with other organisations and other countries.
Well, Jane, that's brilliant to hear, because Inclusive Cork, we're willing to collaborate and follow best international practice as well and bring it to Ireland. That's the way forward. It's the only way forward anyway, is to collaborate and to as you say, they're artificial lines, like we're all human beings, and we're all, on a shared journey experience of our time here. Yeah, brilliant. Jane, have you anything else you want to add to this interview? I think you've given us so much information today. I'm delighted that we caught you out of your busy schedule.
I do ramble on a bit, don't I?
No, it's great.
It's just been great to, and I really hope that, Brexit aside, that our relationship with, Ireland is our closest non-UK country. So, and it makes perfect sense for us to focus a lot of activity there. So I certainly hope that we will be part of the Irish scene in terms of disability equality very shortly too.
That's great. Okay, well, Jane, thank you. Have a great weekend, and all the best. Onwards and upwards for Evenbreak.
And enjoy the Cork Festival this afternoon.
We will. Thank you.
Thanks very much.